This is a video about how to reduce body weight. First of all, I'll talk about what doesn't work. If you are on cocaine and addicted and you stop taking cocaine, you'll have withdrawal symptoms. They'll get less and less over time, and finally it won't take much willpower. If you're addicted to food, then if you stop eating, you will have withdrawal symptoms. They'll get less and less over time, but you're finally going to have to start eating again. In the case of cocaine, just think if you had a refrigerator and a cupboard full of cocaine and you're trying to get off of cocaine, and you had to take a little bit of cocaine 3 times a day, it wouldn't work. You'd never make it because you would always be in this craving for cocaine state. Similarly, with food, if you are addicted to food, if you would, and you try to get off, that works. Your symptoms go away after a little while, but then you need to eat, and if you're eating a little bit 3 times a day, you'll have pain 3 times a day. You'll be hungry and miserable. It's just not going to work. Exercise also doesn't work, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. So what does work? And how did we get here? Let's talk about how we got here. In the end of the Second World War, sugar was no longer rationed. You could buy whatever you want. And the soft drinks companies started pushing soft drinks as a replacement for everything. Soft drinks replaced milk and wine and whiskey and beer, which a lot of people thought that replacing wine and whiskey with soft drinks was a good idea. Turns out maybe not so much. Then what happened in 1976, and I have a chart here, what happened in 1976, and I'll put my finger on 1976. 1976, the head of the FDA came out and said that fat makes you fat. So everybody went on a low-fat, high carbohydrate, high sugar diet. And then at the same time, the food companies found out about what's called the bliss point. The bliss point is when they've added the most sugar without actually making it sickeningly sweet to make it taste better for the population, and all of us are sugar addicted, so they were giving us the maximum amount of added sugars. So we're now eating about 100 pounds per person per day. That's like over a quarter pound a day. Can you imagine that? Well, I can imagine it, because if you go into the grocery stores and read on the shelves added sugars, you'll find that breakfast cereals are mostly about 25% added sugars. Spaghetti sauce has added sugars. Ketchup has now become pretty much red added sugar. Even something like Kraft macaroni and cheese now has 10% added sugars. And the problem with the added sugars is fructose. All of the added sugars, I don't care whether it's table sugar, raw sugar, honey, agave syrup, maple syrup, it doesn't matter. All of them are at least 45% fructose. What's the problem with fructose? Well, if we look at how it's metabolized, glucose is taken in by the intestines, sent to the liver, dispatched out to our bloodstream. Our body creates insulin, which then shepherds the sugars off to where it can be used for energy to be stored as glycogen, or when the glycogen storage is full, gets stored as fat. In the case of fructose, fructose is prevented by the liver from getting out into this bloodstream. Fructose cannot be used by our cells. Fructose is converted by the liver into fat. This fat is either deposited in the liver, and the liver with heavy deposits of fat is fatty liver, one of the major causes of liver transplants. Or it's sent to the omentum, and when it's sent to the omentum is this organ that surrounds your intestines. This organ is a fatty organ, but it cleans up your intestines. It provides bacterial fighting cells for the body and for the cavity, the visceral cavity where your intestines are, and it also takes excess fluids in that cavity and sends them back into your system. When the omentum gets fat, what it does, it causes what's called metabolic syndrome. This is what caused high HDL, low LDL, high A1C, general body inflammation, prediabetes, diabetes, heart disease, arterial calcification, and strokes. All of the bad stuff. And if you just simply walk around town, you'll see that almost everybody looks a little pregnant. And that looking a little pregnant is a fatty omentum, which is causing all of these problems. When I first really realized this, I was thinking, well, my Social Security is secure because all these people are going to die. But now I've thought about it, and my health system is going to be overwhelmed. So maybe I might need some of that sometime. What's wrong with processed foods? Well, the big thing, of course, is added sugars. And also, they have a lot less fiber. There's less fiber in a pizza, we'll say, than almost anything you can think of. And fiber is what moves things through our intestinal system. Retention time in the intestinal system is really critical. If you have long retention time, then you get all of the intestinal diseases. The composition of the bacteria and all the other microbes in your intestines is really critical, and you get the more pathogenic bacteria the longer the things remain in your system. So we need to have fiber to pass everything through. Now the question is, what can we do about all of this? Well, what signals you to stop eating, other than an empty plate, is leptin, which comes from fat, a full stomach, and blood glucose. Blood glucose comes from consuming things that are starch that the body can turn into glucose, or their glucose itself. The fructose in the added sugars, however, short circuits this stop eating and actually adds to appetite. Fructose increases your appetite, whereas glucose would decrease your appetite. What do we do now? Well, I say 4 steps. The first one is stop eating added sugars. Eliminate them completely. So, no more table sugar, no sugar in coffee or tea, no sugary soft drinks, no pie, no cake, no ice cream, no cookies, and nothing that has added sugar. This is going to be the hard part, because going to this grocery store and looking on the shelves, even like in the health section, you'll find lots of added sugars. So it's going to require some skill to avoid all of the added sugars. Even, as I said, Kraft macaroni and cheese, 10% added sugars. The second step is to add fiber. Add enough fiber to make you feel full. That's going to require a significant amount of lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, all of those things. So add enough fiber to your diet, and then allow some fat into your diet. This fat is not to add to all of the carbohydrates you're now eating, but is in place of. For example, you could have 1 piece of toast with butter rather than 2 pieces of dry toast. But think of it that way. Or think of, at any rate, not really working to avoid fat. Maybe you work to watch what you eat. Number 3 is, or I'm sorry, number 4 is fasting. Fasting. I do an 18-8, 18-6 rather. I eat from noon till 6 in the evening, and I don't eat for the next 18 hours until I'm all the way back to noon. And this not only eliminates one meal, but then I'm able to eat enough at noon and in the evening to feel full. I'm not having hunger pains, and I really look like, or the analogy is a dog. If you feed a dog at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and never any other time, the dog won't be looking at his dog dish. He won't be worried about food until about 3:45 maybe, and then the dog starts saying, it's time almost, I need to be getting something, and so the dog might start looking at the cupboard where the dog food is, or looking at you and saying, okay, what's going on here? Going to its dog dish and checking to be sure there isn't anything in it. We're the same way. Once we're on a schedule of eating, then our body isn't looking for eating other than on that schedule. So even going to 1 meal a day, our body would not be looking for food except at that 1 meal time. However, fasting for multiple days, our body does start looking for food. And it's not entirely pleasant, if you would, to get and go on a fast. But it really isn't as bad as you might think. I would recommend not going over 7 days, however, because you need to exercise your intestinal system. You need to exercise that. And if you're going to fast, I would start just ahead of the fast with lots of fiber, so you wouldn't end up with, not so good a bowel system. It would be easier if you're not addicted to caffeine. Caffeine withdrawal is a big headache, and if you're going to fast, you either have to suffer the headache, which I don't recommend, or drink some caffeine during the fast And I don't recommend that either, because that just spikes your appetite. So getting off of caffeine is really a prerequisite for doing the fasting. Also, alcohol. It's okay to have a little alcohol at the start of a meal. Don't end with alcohol, because you'll be ending with something again that spikes your appetite. With all of that, I have a website, happyinintensivecare.com, and if you go on that website, you'll see lots of things that are useful, including more information about health and also about Christianity. Okay, thank you.